My husband and I recently returned from a 10-day pilgrimage to Poland. I wanted to share my reflections about the pilgrimage while the memories are still fresh. I hope this episode of Catholics on Campus offers encouragement as you approach perhaps what might be the most challenging part of your semester. One of my big takeaways from the pilgrimage was the tremendous resilience, courage, and faith of the Polish people over the centuries of oppression and foreign control. While we visited many wonderful cultural sites, I'm going to focus on the parts of the pilgrimage which helped us to grow closer to three Polish saints and their influence not only on their contemporaries, but the world.
Welcome to the Catholics on Campus podcast, where certified Catholic mindset coach and college student development expert Dr. Virginia Cook provides practical tips and coaching to succeed in college while growing in your Catholic faith. And now, your host, Virginia Cook.
Welcome back to the podcast, my friends. When I mentioned to my non-Catholic friends that I was attending a pilgrimage to Poland, I got a lot of questions I was happy to answer, such as, what's a pilgrimage and why Poland? Some of those who asked were familiar with Poles like St. John Paul II, but Saints Maximilian Kolbe and St. Faustina Kowalska were less familiar. Of course, for us Catholics, mentioning those saints brought warm smiles and well wishes. After returning from Poland, I asked the students of one of my classes what they knew about Poland, and their knowledge was pretty limited. They mentioned the food, the red and white flag, and how several concentration camps were located in Nazi Germany-occupied Poland during World War II. Unless you've been to Poland or have a reason to learn about it, your knowledge may be limited as well. This was the largest pilgrimage I have ever been a part of, with 103 pilgrims ranging in age from 25 to 85. With most participants originating from the Chicago area, about a quarter were also Spanish speakers. Pilgrims were single, divorced, widowed, or married, some traveling with their spouses and some not. There were sisters, parish friends, and people who arrived knowing no one and left saying they had a new family. We traveled in two large buses, but still managed to rack up about 15,000 to 20,000 steps a day. We attended daily masses and combinations of English, Spanish, Polish, and Latin. The fall weather cooperated, and while we had some gloomy, cool days with a little rain, we also had a few days with sunny highs in the upper 50s and nighttime lows in the 40s. We arrived in Warsaw after a 9-hour flight, and I quickly learned that to truly appreciate where Poland is today, you need to understand its history over the last 500 years or so. So here's a few highlights for you. The Polish people lived in the same geographic region, which is about the size of the state of Indiana, for more than 1,000 years. Christianity was central to the region since the mid-900s, and in the late 1700s, when the U.S. was just becoming a nation, there was a 123-year period where Poland was erased by partitions. During that time, the Polish people maintained their language, culture, identity, and Catholic faith. Poland regained independence in 1918, only to be invaded and occupied by Nazi Germany during World War II, and later dominated by the Soviet Union until 1989. Through invasions and occupations, Poland suffered many losses, not only of its people, but also its cultural heritage. It's estimated that over 516,000 cultural items were stolen or destroyed during World War II, including paintings, sculptures, and decorative arts. Historic buildings, churches, and synagogues were demolished or damaged, especially in Warsaw, which was nearly leveled during the war. Of course, the scars of the Holocaust are felt across all of Europe, but especially in Poland. In 1939, before the start of World War II, about 1 in 10 Polish citizens were Jews, about 3.5 million Jews. Over 90% of Polish Jews were murdered by the Nazi Germans in concentration and extermination camps. In total, 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. Today, there are only about 20,000 Jews living in Poland. During our pilgrimage, we visited several places where Maximilian Kolbe lived. The first was the city of the Immaculata Monastery, about 26 miles west of Warsaw. In 1927, St. Maximilian Kolbe founded the Franciscan monastery, which was home to the largest religious publishing house in the world at the time and operated by over 1,000 friars. We also attended a beautiful mass in the wooden chapel where St. Maximilian offered mass. Due to time constraints, we were only able to spend a short time at the There Was a Man Museum, which details the saint's life and accomplishments until his death at Auschwitz concentration camp. If you've seen the 2025 movie, Triumph of the Heart, you know that St. Maximilian Kolbe selflessly offered to take the place of a family man who cried out when he was chosen to die in a starvation bunker. St. Maximilian led 9 men in prayer and song, praying for the conversion of their persecutors. After surviving for 2 weeks with no food or water, he was killed by lethal injection. In 1982, the family man who Maximilian saved was present when Pope John Paul II canonized Kolbe, calling him the patron of our difficult century. The Pope also said, St. Maximilian's act gives people hope because it shows that even in the most extreme circumstances of life, a person can save their dignity. One always remains free in their choices. All the darkness of evil is not capable of extinguishing even the smallest flame of love. When we toured the Auschwitz concentration camp, we got to see the tiny basement cell where St. Maximilian and 9 others suffered and died. There were few words I can say about that experience. It truly touched my soul. When Pope Francis visited Auschwitz in 2016, he wrote a simple prayer in the visitor's book. He wrote, Lord, have mercy on your people. Lord, forgive so much cruelty. You can't travel across Poland without observing the deep love and reverence the Polish people have for Saint Pope John Paul II. The significance of the election of Pope John Paul II cannot be overstated. In October 1978, he was the first non-Italian pope in over 450 years and the first ever Slavic pope. At age 58, he was one of the youngest popes in the 20th century. Perhaps most surprising was that he was from a suppressed nation under communist control. Several tour guides remarked how surprising it was when a U.S.-born bishop was elected as pope earlier this year. However, they said Pope John Paul II's election was an even greater point of pride and inspiration for the Poles. After his election as pope in October 1978, he wasted no time, making the first pontifical pilgrimage to Poland in June 1979. We visited Warsaw's Victory Square, where Pope John Paul II invoked the Lord to, quote, let your spirit descend and renew the face of the earth, the face of this land, unquote. His papal visits galvanized national pride and spiritual unity and encouraged peaceful resistance against communist rule. His Be Not Afraid message, delivered during his inaugural Mass in 1978, became a rallying cry for oppressed people across Eastern Europe. In his rural hometown of Ładowice, we visited his family home in an apartment building next to a church. The building now houses an excellent 3-story museum telling the story of his upbringing, religious life, and accomplishments during his 26-year pontificate. The church where he attended is now a minor basilica of St. Pope John Paul II. We attended Mass there on the feast day of St. Pope John Paul II, October 22nd. We also visited the John Paul II Cultural Center, Do Not Be Afraid, which features a shrine to him. Several of his relics are also there, including the blood-stained papal cassock that he wore during an assassination attempt in 1981 on the feast day of Our Lady of Fatima. He was shot 4 times at close range with bullets striking his abdomen, right arm, and left hand. During the 5-hour surgery, he lost 3/4 of his blood. Pope John Paul II credited Our Lady of Fatima for saving his life and later donated the bullet that struck him to the shrine in Fatima, where it was placed in the crown of Our Lady's statue. We also got to celebrate the Mass at the Sanctuary of Our Lady of Fatima near the resort town of Zakopane, located near the Tatra Mountains, where Pope John Paul II often visited. As a young priest and even as a bishop, he loved leading people to see God in the beauty of nature and experience detachment from worldly worries. We spent a few hours in Zakopane before returning to our hotels for the evening. It might be no surprise to know that hundreds of places are named for the beloved Pope John Paul II, including the Krakow airport, hospitals, parishes, and cultural centers. There are also hundreds of statues and memorials in public squares, churches, courtyards, and parks. While in Krakow, we toured through the campus where 18-year-old Karol Wojtyła studied philosophy and literature. The German Nazis abruptly closed the university in 1939. Starting in the mid-1950s, Professor and Bishop Wojtyła taught ethics and philosophy at the Catholic University of Lublin until his election as Pope. The university was later renamed Pope John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin in his honor. In August 2002, Pope John Paul II visited Poland for the final time and consecrated the Sanctuary of Divine Mercy in Krakow. This was the final resting place of St. Faustina Kowalska, the last saint I'll highlight for you from this pilgrimage. Upon arrival in Warsaw, the first stop of our pilgrimage was to the shrine of St. Faustina. This is the place where, in 1925, at the age of 18, Faustina Kowalska was accepted into the convent by the Sisters of Our Lady of Mercy. The church was purposefully destroyed by German Nazis during World War II and underwent extensive restoration after the end of communism. We celebrated Mass there 4 times, including a final stop before heading back to the airport on the last day of our pilgrimage. If you aren't familiar with this very special saint, let me give you a quick summary. Saint Faustina recorded her mystical visions and conversations with Jesus in her diary, which was published after her death. It's called The Divine Mercy in My Soul. In it, she tells how Jesus instructed her to have an image painted of him with the rays of red and white emanating from his heart, and to place an inscription beneath it saying, "Jesus, I trust in you." Jesus also taught her a special prayer, the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, to be said on ordinary rosary beads. The prayer invokes mercy for oneself and the whole world, especially for sinners and the dying. In 2000, Pope John Paul II officially established Divine Mercy Sunday to be held on the Sunday after Easter, on the same day he canonized Faustina. While she died of tuberculosis at the age of 33, the Divine Mercy devotion is one of the most widespread Catholic devotions. Another stop on our pilgrimage was to the rural childhood home of St. Faustina, about 80 miles west of Warsaw. She lived in a small house with her parents and 9 siblings surrounded by farmland. We also visited her childhood church located about 1.5 miles from her home. There, she was baptized and received her first Holy Communion at age 9. We also visited several UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the Walenska Salt Mine and Warsaw and Krakow squares. In addition, we visited the Basilica of Our Lady of Sorrows, Queen of Poland, which is one of the largest church buildings in the world, and Wilonow Palace, called the Versailles of Poland, a stunning Baroque royal summer palace which survived Poland's partitions and both world wars. And yes, we visited the monastery of Janoskorza, home of the miraculous image of Our Lady of Częstochowa. It is one of the most important pilgrim sites in the world and considered the spiritual capital of Poland. The Pauline Fathers community are the guardians of the image, also known as the Black Madonna. They receive about 4 million pilgrims a year. I remember kneeling in front of the icon of Our Lady of Częstochowa, in almost the same spot where there was a picture of John Paul II kneeling and being touched not by the grandeur of the altar, but by the deep devotion of the pilgrims. There is actually a place where they can walk behind the altar of where this image is, and many Poles and other pilgrims will do this on their knees. There are actually ruts in the marble where millions of pilgrims have crawled on their knees around this image. When I was kneeling in front of the icon, I was reminded that a pilgrimage is not about reaching a destination, it's about being transformed along the journey. In a 2024 address, Pope Francis encouraged pilgrims to travel light. Traveling light, as Pope Francis urged, isn't about just packing less, it's about shedding the weight of resentment, distraction, and fear. Each step forward was a chance to walk freer and closer to grace. Our pilgrimage is an opportunity to focus on the essentials of faith, including deepening our self-understanding and rediscovering God's love for us. Pilgrims experience the hardships of travel, delayed flights, jet lag, highway construction zones, long restroom lines, or unfamiliar food, and these are sufferings that can be offered up. A few times we even found ourselves looking for lost sheep, that is, pilgrims who did not find their way back to the bus on time. Several pilgrims stayed behind in Zakopane with another pilgrim who went to the ER after suffering dehydration. Many pilgrims slowed down to help others with mobility issues who struggled to keep up with the fast-paced pilgrimage. I have no doubt the blessings of these charitable acts of mercy will be felt for some time after the pilgrimage. As we prayed the Divine Mercy Chaplet on the bus, I kept hearing the words, "Have mercy on us and on the whole world." And I realized we were living that prayer. We were challenged to care for one another's spiritual and emotional needs by offering forgiveness, praying for others, encouraging moral correction with compassion, and offering assurance to those in doubt. Several times I heard conversations about, is the church dying? And consistently the answer was a resounding no. The faithfulness of the pilgrims we encountered along our journey was a stark reminder that Christian love will conquer all. My dear Catholics on campus, I hope you enjoyed this special pilgrimage episode and learned a little bit about the value of pilgrimage and the important history of 3 Polish saints. Please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your friends. I really appreciate your help with spreading the word about the podcast. Until next time, my friends, Mary, Untied of Knots, pray for us.
If you are an ambitious college student who desires to leverage your God-given talents to live in beatitude and make a bold difference in the world, Dr. Virginia Cook can help you excel in your educational journey and grow in your Catholic identity. As founder of Knots Untied Coaching, Virginia offers mindset coaching from an authentically Catholic perspective and collegiate success and well-being strategies for happy, healthy, and holy living. Want to stay connected? Visit knotsuntied.com to learn how to join an amazing community of like-minded Catholic college students and their parents. You can also follow her on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook. Check out the show notes for links and special offers.